Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today for this Facebook Live session. My name is Paul and I work as a publisher in the primary maths team at Oxford University Press. And today we're going to be having a discussion about times tables, making specific reference to the times tables checks that are coming in 2019 and 2020 for Year 4 children. Now, to help me in this discussion, I'm joined by one of my slightly jet-lagged colleagues, Louise, who's from our professional development team.
So hi, I'm Louise Pennington. I'm the Professional Development Leader for Maths Numicon here at OUP. I am jet-lagged Paul because I've just returned from Shanghai, which has been a really interesting trip.
Great. So before we get into discussing the finer points of the times tables check itself, let's spend a little bit of time actually discussing why learning times tables is important.
Well, apart from the fact that it's a key aim for the 2014 UK National Curriculum, so that fluency in times tables is key there. But apart from that, it's a really important thing in terms of just general real life, so learning times tables. And I think that if we can aim for teaching of automaticity around the times tables, then children will have a much deeper understanding, because that combines fluency with the automatic recall, but they've got that depth of understanding as well around times tables. So combining those two things together really means that children can commit it to long-term memory, which then frees up their working memory to attend to any more complex or deeper thinking around a maths problem. So generally they are a good idea. There's quite a different schools of thought on that, but I do believe that learning times tables fluently is a good idea. And I've just returned from Shanghai, just we asked about, where we did have the opportunity to watch teachers teaching times tables. And in that lesson, it was really clear that they were over quite quickly. So we had a discussion around how they teach times tables and what they focus on. And whilst we focus on working on up to 12 times 12, that in Shanghai they learn the times tables, but they don't repeat commutative facts. So therefore, by the time they get to their 8 times table, they just have to learn 8 times 8 and 8 times 9. Which means that they have less of the trickier facts to learn because they've already dealt with commutativity earlier on. So that was really interesting. I think it would help our children in terms of that chanting and learning the songs and things for times tables if we just focused on the facts that weren't commutative, as long as we've been teaching pattern all the way through.
Okay, great. And how can we get to the point of automaticity with our children? What really helps to embed good understanding of times tables facts?
Well, that's a really good question, because I know a lot of children can learn them quite easily and others take a while. So I think it's a joint job of all the teachers, and also it's parental responsibility that that kind of step and skip counting earlier on, so counting in groups is really important, but children also need to know what the answer is and then what the times table question would be. So I think for me, really important to focus on the concrete, pictorial and abstract. We have a few things here, and that's really important that children get to see pattern and notice the pattern, and then be able to draw and represent, and then also work on up to recording, because that's where the understanding of that, what's actually happening to numbers, comes from. And I think that pattern spotting is really key, and there's lots of things. So we've already laid out a card track, which we can't tip up now because it's full of counters, but really important, we've just got the 1 to 10 here, and we've tagged the 2 times table in one colour, 3 times table in another, and the 4 times table in another colour. And you can also already see that there are some common numbers that come up. So obviously common multiples, we've got 4's got a few counters on, 6 has, 8 has, and then to do that up to 100 and beyond is really important, because you can see those common multiples popping up, and we're looking for patterns and relationships all the time. And also prime numbers will begin to pop out because they haven't got the tags on. So that's really important. And I can't do a session without mentioning Numicon. So for me, Numicon really is supportive of that early on, so that repeated addition, if you like. So with the 4 shape here, that's the group, and it's a fixed group. So how many 4's is quite nice. We've got 3 4's here. And also we can link the division facts quite nicely there. So it's quite nice to have a fixed image for a number with the Numicon shapes. Rods are another great example. So we've got some rods here, and we've also looked at, commutativity here. So 4 times 5 and 5 times 4, that they are the same space in terms of area. So rectangles have the same area, but that they also have the same length, so the same product when you lay them out lengthways. That's really important. And even things like, we used to spend a lot of time the national curriculum working on bundling things. So, bundling up straws into fives and we can count in fives is really helpful. And also, the good old cubes are useful. So there's lots of ways in which children can access that. And also the chants and the rhymes and the songs, they are important to aid children's memory.
I really love the fact that with the number rods where you can layer the 5 lots of 4 on top of the 4 lots of 5, helping to demonstrate how visual that is for those commutative facts,
and
which you're going back to in the
the
Shanghai experience that you just had. Just a really powerful way of getting children to see what it is that they're learning.
I think laying out with arrays in counters or items is important too, but there's something quite nice about the rods, isn't there, in terms of you can physically see that link.
Really nice tactile thing to have as well.
Yeah. Indeed.
And all of that is hopefully going to help us to build a real depth of learning and understanding within the classrooms. So is there anything else that you think can help to foster that deep learning?
I think we've already mentioned real life problems, and I think that's such an important thing that children need to understand when they might need times tables and what might be useful there. And so that applying the facts that they're learning, and also a range of activities, so not just the same thing. So for me, lots of concrete, some pictorial things, and there's definitely space there for online activities as well, I think, just to build it up. It's really important.
Great. You very nicely mentioned some online activities there. We know that they can be a great tool to encourage the development of fluency in particular and times tables recall, and also a great way of children getting repeated practice of that times tables skill that they need. And I know that you've authored some times tables activities for MyMaths. Is there anything that you'd like to specifically mention, or just about what it is about the digital element that's so key?
I think for me one key is engagement. I think there's some children that get really engaged by digital content, and it does support them in the more pictorial and abstract phase of learning as well, because they've got representations of the actual items but they can't physically manipulate them, so that's quite useful. And also the digital content, particularly MyMaths, there's a lot of context differences there, so different reasons why the children might need to apply their knowledge of times tables. So that to me is quite key. And plus, even the empty box, so that missing numbers, and then different little puzzles, I think is really important. So children are practicing all that together with the concrete, the pictorial and abstract. It does add another element, doesn't it, to that practice? Well,
also one of the things that can also be useful about digital activities is that you get a bit of that intelligent randomisation. So each time children practice it, they're seeing similar questions but not exactly the same numbers. So it gives them lots and lots of opportunities to practice what essentially is the same activity, but it looks and feels quite different for the numerical side of the practice.
And that is important, isn't it? Because it's that, like you're saying, that intelligent practice is actually really important for children to practice and learn. So I think all in all it just adds a nice roundness to that ability to pick up those facts.
Great. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about the times tables checks themselves. What do we know about them?
Well, we know quite a bit because obviously we've had some schools piloting those. They're optional next year, so this academic year. That does affect my children, they're in year 4. And then compulsory from 2020. So I think that's interesting, and there's some lessons to learn and things to practice, I guess. Administered digital online, we know that, we've known that all along. Around a 5-minute test in the question format of A times B equals, so that the children are asked to generate the answer. And I think that is as much as we know in terms of the content of the test and what it might look like.
And as those checks are going to be administered online, there's a few interesting questions about how children might respond to the onlineness of the activities. For example, if you're doing it from a fixed desktop and you're inputting the answers versus on a keyboard versus touchscreen devices, and anything that you think is important around that?
Well, I think there's a lot. I think for me, one of the key things is that children, we haven't probably done this before. I know that there's been elements of this in other, UK regions, so that the Welsh have had online testing, not without its issues in the infancy. But I think that, for me, one of the questions that in my mind is that, how familiar are the children with the QWERTY keyboards? And if the children are going to access that via a fixed desktop computer,
Yeah.
then how familiar are they with the keyboard there? And I'm thinking of my own children here as well. That, our children are pretty good with their thumbs on iPads. And if it's accessible on an iPad, then that might be easier for children to use. But there is something slightly different about the QWERTY keyboard, isn't there? And also a difference between a QWERTY keyboard on a laptop and then on a desktop. You've got the keys are bigger, so children will find that really interesting and a little bit of a challenge perhaps. And I think alongside that, if there is going to be differences with the way that they're used to working, is the fact that we know that there will be limited response time, because we're aiming for fluency, so children should have these facts at their fingertips. So around 8 to 12 seconds was what was muted at the beginning of the trial period, but we do believe that it's probably going to be at the lower end, so around about 8 seconds. So if you think about that, then there is something to be said there about how familiar children are with the keyboard. So to read the question, to process that, to formulate the answer or to retrieve the answer, and then to find their way around what keyboard they're using is an interesting one, isn't it? It's like, how familiar are the children with these? And I think that another thing to add there is that if it is around 8 seconds, that some of those facts the children might be really quick at retrieving and inputting, and others might be a bit more tricky. So we do know that time isn't going to be rolled over. So if you're really quick at answering one question, the next question, the time doesn't roll over. So you haven't got 12 seconds to answer the next one because you're really quick on the one before. And so I think that's interesting, isn't it? I think it could cause some problems for schools around logistics. So how many devices or laptops or computers do they have that the children can access? So it could cause some issues in terms of accessibility.
And although there's been some heated debate about these times tables checks themselves, the general principle or the importance of children being able to understand their times tables and to be able to quickly recall these facts is something that a lot of educators would agree is a good thing. So what advice could we give to teachers, to parents, to help them sort of minimise the pressure or the impact that these checks might have on their day-to-day teaching?
That's a really good question. I think it's the same that we would advise Year 6 teachers for SATs, that we don't make a big deal out of these, that we keep them low-key, that there's lots of ways in which children can practice, so things like digital content, MyMaths for example, there's lots of things that we can do on there that will allow children to practice using laptops and desktop computers. And I think that lots of practice on CPA, so pattern spotting, relationships, so children understand more deeply their times tables and what that's all about. And then also that it isn't just, we always say that it isn't just Year 2 and Year 6 teachers for the SATs, and this isn't just a Year 4 teacher's job here, it's cumulative over time, so all our early counting, step counting, skip counting, etc. It's everybody's job from Key Stage 1 onwards to prepare and practice for this in a really low-key way, because we know that learning times tables, is probably quite a useful thing to do. Yeah.
It's also worth saying that the Oxford OWL website has got some great support for parents to help parents to encourage further embed that understanding of times tables. It's got some really nice activities, some really good opportunities for real life applications as well.
And again supports that using digital access, so you're using a laptop or iPad to access something, so it's practice in the way that the test might be given to the children, because what you don't want is something unfamiliar, because that is going to make children anxious. So I think that's just sensible, isn't it? Sensible all around.
Great. And then to help you embed times tables skills in your class, we've worked together to put a range of Numicon and MyMaths support resources, including a sample lesson, some times tables posters and some worksheets onto the Oxford University Press website. So to find this content, you can either check out the link that we've posted in the comments section below, or you can search for times tables on the Oxford University Press website. Thanks very much to everyone for joining us for this discussion. We hope it's been useful. Louise has done an excellent job of staying awake throughout the jet lag. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions, please feel free to get in touch, add them to the comments, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Thanks
very much.
Thank you very much.